Good morning, folks. Dennis Jr. here with my father, Denny Sr. in the recording studio. Today we're going to cover a question we get from a lot of customers, and that is small-handed players. We have a lot of small-handed players, and I will say we probably have the most small-handed players buying our guitar, I don't know, possibly than any other brand right now, and it's due to the design of our guitars. If you look at our guitars, you're gonna, and you won't notice this, especially as a beginning player, but as an advanced player, those guys pick up on this real quick when they pick up one of our guitars. And there's some little key things that you don't really notice at first, but we're gonna go in detail here. And first off is the neck on our guitars. And for a small-handed player, they really are a joy. When you look at our neck, and let's hold this up here so they can see, the distance between the front and the back is very slim. And you look at many guitars on the market, and this distance, I tell you, some of these things, they will stick out. My dad likes to call them baseball bats because they're so deep and thick from the back. And when you're trying to get your hand around this, and let's go ahead and put it in your hand again. When you're trying to get your hand around this to form a chord, and if your hand's very small, and your hand's not exactly big, Dad, but we've got some big-handed players too. But if your hand's very small and you're trying to get your hand around that neck, put your hand around it there so they can see, and you've got a huge neck, your fingers aren't going to make it all the way around to make some of these chords. And in combination, now you add that with our lower string heights on our guitars, and you'll see here, they're extremely low. Lower string pressures as well, meaning when you push down on that string, not only do you have less distance to push down, but when you do push down, you're not having to press near as hard. And then on top of this, our custom string spacing. If you look at the spacing on our guitars, you'll notice this spacing from string to string is just a smidgen wider. And you might think at first, as being a small-handed player, that's not a good thing.
Straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah, a straw that broke the camel's back. I tell you this, as a small-handed player, any size hand player for that matter, you want just a smidgen more space between these strings. And what that does, when you're like making a certain chord here, and go ahead and hold like an F or whatever. Yeah, a chord like this, let's say. When you're holding some of these chords, and hold that position there, just that little extra space between the strings, and we're talking like a 1/16 of an inch, and you're not leaning and muting out or buzzing your adjacent strings.
See that?
And that's the difference between a muted buzz and a buzzed chord that you're not making at all, and do a demonstration of that.
One chord that'll really show it really well is a C chord. Up here, I want to play this note right here, but I don't want to run into this note.
That
Nor
string?
do I want to run into that note. I want to.
You mean you're talking about running into the string?
Exactly,
Okay.
and muting it.
Those adjacent strings.
So if I lay down just a little bit here, it's muting that. I have to be up like that, and just that minute, a little more space in there makes a difference whether that string rings or not.
It's the difference between a buzzed, muted out chord and one that rings clear. And when you look at guitars, especially if you're a beginner, going out to the guitar shops, they'll pretty much look the same. But it's just this minute difference that means the difference between you making that chord and not. And I tell you, as a beginning player, you can get discouraged so fast. My dad noticed this when you started teaching 45. He's been teaching for 50 years now. And beginner players, it's amazing. They could have tried. How many players have come into the studio when you're teaching and say, I've tried on and off again to play guitar for 25 years, and I've always got discouraged. And then they bring in the guitar, and my father grabs it and tries to play it, and says, if you couldn't play the guitar as a 70-year player, you could not play the guitar. Where does that leave the beginning player? So coming back full circle to small hands, though, if you're a small-handed player, we have more smaller-handed players buying our guitars, I think, than any other brand.
some of you might have heard of Andre Segovia way back when. He's deceased now. But if you looked at his hands...
He's a pro guitar player?
One of the best in the world in his time. He played for the president and God knows what. But he had the fattest fingers I've ever seen. And I couldn't believe what he could do just with those fat fingers. But it's getting yourself a guitar that fits you. That's what's so important. It's not whether you have long fingers or skinny fingers. Oh, sometimes it's an advantage or a disadvantage. But taking an open mind and thinking about this, just doing it and getting a guitar that fits the size of your hand is so important.
Yeah, it can mean the difference between you succeeding and not succeeding. And, you know, when you have a guitar that's working for you instead of against you, it makes a world of difference. So small-handed players, you know, keep these points in mind when you're looking at guitars out there. But do keep in mind our guitars, small-handed players, they work extremely well. One other thing to include here, a lot of customers ask, what about a lot of smaller-handed players think that they need to go with a smaller guitar. And when I say smaller, I'm looking over here at our lineup. These two here, like the parlor size, the travel size, or even an OM. Now I will say our OM models have the exact same neck. All of our guitars have the same neck circumference, meaning the whole back and shape of it, even our smaller guitars, is the same. The difference you'll find with these smaller guitars, and maybe we should demonstrate this. I'm going to grab this parlor. Let's hold these side by side here. And what you see here is a smaller-handed player is going to have an easier time with all of our guitars, just because of our circumference of the neck is very thin front to back on all of our guitars. But one thing you will notice specifically on our parlor model and our travel model, our two smallest models, is that these fret spaces, and Dad, maybe you can help me out with this a little bit, the fret spaces are a little bit closer for 4-fret chords. So let's give an example of like a 4-fret chord.
Most of your chords are 3 frets. 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
Spaces. If you have a 4, boy, that is really reaching. And you get down here, and naturally the frets are a little bit closer together. That's the reason why I might use a capo on a certain instrument.
Well, let's not. I want to keep this simple though for beginner players. How does this compare, this parlor guitar, to a full-size guitar? The necks, the spacing of the frets. Can you put these side by side and show the spacing of the frets?
Well, I don't know how close I can get here.
So,
Can you see?
if I'm looking at the spacing of the first fret to the second fret, this fret space to this fret space. You'll notice this one is just a little bit shorter. This fret space, you notice this one is just a little bit shorter yet. And as you work your way down, this guitar, the smaller guitar, there's less space between the frets. And what this does, especially for what we were just showing, show them a 4-fret chord on this guitar.
Wow.
Your reach on this guitar, and show from this finger to this finger, is not going to be quite as much as on a full-size guitar. Put your hand on that. Kind of tough here.
Yeah. See this?
There's a little more reach on these frets.
And again, the minor difference you don't think makes much difference, but it does.
But the big advantage is just our neck design in general. But if they really want to get, if you've really got a small hand, I would suggest probably our parlor guitar. Though I do have some very small-handed players using our full-size guitar. My mother's one of them. She's 5'1" and very tiny, and she's got tiny hands, but she still plays our OM size, which has a full-size neck just like our full-size guitars. But if you want the absolute smallest for like 4-fret chords, then I would probably recommend our parlor size or travel size guitar. I usually recommend the parlor just because it's got a bigger box than the little box travel, and you'll get a bigger sound out of it. But just some things to keep in mind for smaller-handed players. You're already in the right place. You've got the right guitar. It's just a matter of, you know, fine-tuning your decision-making process here and deciding which one you want. But if you have any other questions, don't be afraid to call or email. Someone's here 7 days a week. We will take care of you. And do remember, all of our guitars have a 100% money-back guarantee, lifetime warranty, meaning if you get it, it doesn't work out for you for whatever reason, we pick it up, we pay shipping both ways. You're not out a penny to try one. Okay, till next video, folks. Take care.